Oh, hey, didn't see you there. You caught me working on the next Terraria video. Now, it's not quite ready yet, but judging by the look on your face, you're probably not leaving until I show you some pretty cool models. No worries, let me shut this down for now and we'll head into the living room and boot up the PS2. See, everyone has that childhood game. The one that shapes your tastes, sticks in your memory, and becomes the reason you love what you love. For me, that was Ratchet and Clank, specifically the original trilogy on PS2, and the criminally underrated Deadlocked. The first game laid out the foundation for the series, your classic planet hopping, gadget finding, and of course, buying all those crazy ridiculous weapons. But it was the second title released, Going Commando, that took everything to the next level. It introduced so much that became core to the series. Arenas, armor, racing, challenges, but most importantly, it doubled down on what made the games iconic. All of the crazy, wacky, awesome weapons. Weapons now leveled up with use, gaining new effects, more damage, entirely changing how they look visually, and even evolving with these crazy, flashy, dopamine-inducing animations. It's like Pokemon, but with guns. You could even add extra mods for cool effects like lock-on aiming, acid and shock damage, and so much more. Beating the game and starting a playthrough plus also unlocked a third tier of weapon levels as well. It gave you a real reason to experiment, even with the weapons you might have ignored the first time around, just to see what they would turn into. It was like those early days of Call of Duty Zombies when Pack-a-Punch would still turn even some of the worst weapons into something totally different and unique. That draw of, oh my god, what could this turn into? Anyways, I'm kind of gushing here, but this game was my childhood, and this video is certainly a love letter to it. These weapons were fun, unique, and unforgettable designs, but were limited by the tech of their time. Their models had a limited amount of polygons, and the textures were flat and really low resolution. So today, we're giving them the glow up they absolutely deserve. Let's recreate the gun models of Ratchet and Clank Going Commando in their full, high polygon, high resolution 2025 glory. Wow, I just realized these models are more than 20 years old. Guess time really does fly, huh? Speaking of time, let's not waste any and head right into the modeling. We're kicking things off with a classic, the Blitz Gun. This thing lives rent-free in my head whenever I think about blasting my way through Going Commando. It's your shotgun archetype and the very first weapon you can actually buy in a new playthrough. It's got this giant angled square barrel thing and compensator-like wings on either side. It's chunky, over the top, and full of that early Ratchet and Clank weapon design charm. Sure, it's completely impractical for a shotgun. No stock, a scope, and nothing to shoulder with. But if you're even pausing to think about that, you're using it wrong. This thing's meant to be loud and fast. Double thumbs up from me. Now, since I had access to the original models straight from the PS2 game, I brought the model for the Blitz Gun into Blender and rendered out orthographic views of all sides. Then I dropped those into Plasticity as reference planes, one for each axis, and set them to be front-facing, and this time eventually one-sided, so the correct image always shows depending on the angle I'm viewing on. You'll see me reorganize my reference images like that at some point in the modeling footage. To start, I blocked out the upper and lower receiver sort of parts. The Blitz Gun's design is super readable, which is good. Basic shapes, no weird compound curves, so it made for an easy first pass of some of those really big, larger parts. I extruded the forms out and then moved on to the handle. After getting the rough shape, I beveled the edges to give it that classic grippy look early. I added in the side grip, something you see a lot on Ratchet and Clank weapons, and then spent a little time shaping the handle's hilt, dialing in that bottom curve until it felt just right. Then came the barrel. I modeled one half of it and mirrored it, and then duplicated and scaled down a copy to use as a Boolean cut solid tool, which opened up that kind of central part of the barrel. Since I knew I'd need to bevel the edges where it connects to the receiver, I also moved the back receiver into the front of the barrel just a little bit so it sits cleanly inside. After that, I sliced up the barrel's body into a few separate solids just so I could bevel in a few more visual details and depth and could add some materials later on in Blender a bit more properly and satisfying. With the frame taking shape, I circled back and beveled more of the receiver to define the silhouette, then jumped into modeling those side wings, those sort of compensator-like pieces. First, I blocked out the angled base shape of it, then cut in the vent slots and that sort of rounded large cut at the back end of each of those compensator wing piece things. There's also like a panel-like solid along the top and bottom edges of those parts, and it looks like it's almost inserted into these pieces, so I modeled those in separately for a layered look, and I can apply different materials to them later. Then came the cursed part. Moving back to the side grip, or, hence the cursed part of this, the charging handle. See, in-game, Ratchet does this little animation like he's racking a shell when firing it, but on the original model, the handle isn't even connected to the bolt cut seen in the original textures. So I invented a way to make it kind of make sense. I added like an angled arm solid from the grip that led into the receiver, connecting it visually to the bolt area inside. It's not realistic, but hey, it works and lets me stay true to the original model's layout and geometry. After that, I built the front bottom grip, which was just a few solid extrusions with some beveled edges. I sliced it in half and separated the pieces to bevel the inner edge where the grip insert would be, and I added that kind of comfort look to it. Then I went back and tackled the scope. That part gave me a bit of a headache first, figuring out how to divide the geometry cleanly, but I eventually split it into 3 solids: the frame, the back insert, and then the kind of silver part that's separated from the frame at the front. I actually modeled an EOTech site a few weeks ago, and it was kind of a similar process, which I thought was funny. Anyways, I used booleans to carve out slots in the back of the site for those glowing orangey elements you see in game on the original model, and then modeled the crosshair as actual 3D solids instead of just relying on a flat texture. That way I could assign an emission material in Blender later and really make it pop and glow and almost feel like a hologram that's being kind of suspended away from the site. It is a futuristic weapon after all. Before calling it, I added some finishing touches like that plate under the scope that attaches to the receiver and the big bolts on either side that secure it. I even added a trigger, something oddly absent from most weapon models from the original game. I also added some more additional beveled cylinder extrusions to the side grip handle, so it looks more grippy and comfortable to hold. Oh, and I didn't want to leave the barrel empty, so I added an array of tiny micro barrel things inside to give the sense that this thing's firing a full spread sci-fi style. See, the original barrel just uses a pure black texture to give the effect of not being able to see what's at the back or inside of the barrel, or really how the heck it even fires. While it may look weird here while we're still editing in Plasticity, it was a really awesome aspect of the weapon when shown off in the final render, so I'm glad I took that direction. Once I was happy with some more detail passes and some polishing, like some additional cuts and just solid intrusions and inserts, I then sent it into Blender and added materials and ran some really cool renders. This is a strong start. So this is the Blitz Gun from Ratchet & Clank Going Commando, remastered and reimagined. Low poly 2003 to high def 2025. Let's take a look. I'm actually really happy with how this first model came out. I mean, it really does look like if Going Commando was remastered today, what some of the weapon models would look like. And that definitely continues on with the other 2 remaining models that we'll take a look at soon. The Megacorp themed blue and gray material choices fit so nicely here, and all those little chamber firing thingies I added into the front back of the barrel look so damn cool when lit up with emission shaders in the final render. Like, you can imagine each one sending out their own accelerated particle of death upon every trigger pull. So cool. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this one, but we still got 2 more models to go, and trust me, it really does only get better from here. Next up, the Heavy Lancer. Okay, so originally I had planned to model just the base Lancer, the standard starter weapon in any going Commando playthrough you get right from the start. But the more I looked at it, the more it felt just like a little too basic. It's just a blaster pistol. Fine, but not exactly inspiring. And since this was the first Ratchet game to introduce the weapon upgrade system, it felt like a missed opportunity not to show what that evolution can look like. So instead, I went with its upgraded, evolved form, the Heavy Lancer, a beefed up sci-fi assault rifle / light machine gun thing with these almost hydraulic pole looking things on each side and a beefy glowing drum of molten lava energy stuff. Way cooler. So, like before, I imported the original PS2 model into Blender, set up orthographic views on my camera for each side, and rendered out all 6 sides to use as references in Plasticity. I aligned the reference planes at the very start, one-sided and front-facing, of course, to keep the workspace clean and let me work from any plane or angle I'm viewing from. I usually like to start with a central defining piece of a weapon when I'm doing modeling like this, typically something large and structurally important. For this one, I chose the big central drum that looks like it's storing that glowing molten energy I referenced earlier. So I extruded a cylinder, then scaled it to give it that kind of oval profile we see in the original model. From there, I added the 2 end caps at the front, followed by the thick sort of bracket frame receiver piece that wraps over the top starting from the back side of the drum, kind of again like a supporting frame solid piece. Once that was in place, I blocked out the back section of the weapon, basically the solid chunk that acts as a frame for all those little mechanical bits that get attached to it later on. That led directly into the top bracket piece that runs from the top of the handle to the top of the drum and weapon. It's another pretty key structural element. At that point, the back of the gun was actually starting to come together pretty nicely. Next, I went for the handle. I profiled out that curve, beveled it for more ergonomic feel, and then added 2 connecting solid pieces that join the base of the grip back to the back frame of the weapon. Pretty simple solids that kind of tie it all together visually and just attach that handle back to the weapon. With the core structure pretty locked down, I started adding a few more details, like that circular hinge looking part on top, which is actually kind of like the support for the side grip that we'll do later. I also went back to that rear block and added support brackets, including those distinct sort of P-shaped bracket looking things that run vertically and reconnect with the top hinge. They're a bit over-designed and funky, but they do make the silhouette feel more industrial and detailed and is on the original model, so I do think it actually looks quite nice. I added some bolts and screws to those brackets, just like the original model, and beveled out a few of the edges connecting the grip to the back of the gun. Then I moved forward again to the top receiver-ish part and started work on those strange winged fins, like little triangular rounded bracket-looking panel things that jut out from the front top edge. They don't seem to serve a functional purpose, but they could easily be imagined as either like a make-do front iron sight, albeit not too effective, or like it's some sort of hinge connector, allowing it to be mounted to some sort of battle spaceship, almost like mounted miniguns in real life. They help sell the silhouette, and that's enough for me. Once that was in place, I modeled the side grip. Just like on the Blitz gun, it's a simple extrusion with a cap, but I do eventually break it into 3 equal segments and beveled each one of those edges on either side of the segments to give it that comfy, grippy look. With the back half of the weapon mostly finished, I turned my attention to the barrel. I started with that large barrel housing that kind of connects off the front of the magma thing canister, which is basically just extruding a cylinder and beveling that rear edge to match what shows in the original model. I then sliced it to separate the silver and blue metal sections, just like seen on the original texture. Next, I modeled the barrel itself, which was a simple cylinder extrusion, but I also was cutting in some gas vents along the top and bottom for some added detail that's also seen on the original model and texture. That whole front section got a subtle taper and bevel pass to keep the edges clean in the render, and yeah, looks good. The muzzle piece at the end of the barrel was a kind of a simple extrude and cut job, honestly easier than I originally thought it would be. I added those side notches by cutting into it and beveled them. From there, I decided it was time to move on to some more of the noticeable, smaller but still very important detailed elements. Mainly those 3 horizontal rods that run from the rear and side of the frame, then horizontally over to the barrel housing. To me, these feel like almost hydraulic stabilizers of some kind, like maybe they recoil inward while firing. The bottom rod was easy to size and place, and I added its little conical end cap sort of insert piece as well. Before I tackled the 2 side rods, I quickly built the unused front grip, which was just a few extrusions and bevels for comfort detailing, nothing really wild. I just wanted to add this now since I had that bottom hydraulic pole thing done and wanted to connect those 2 together. But then, when returning to the 2 side hydraulic poles, I kind of ran into a bit of a snag. See, the side rods looked like they were the same diameter as the center one when I looked at the reference images from the side. But when I started working on it, I realized that they actually clashed with the surrounding geometry on the sides of the weapons because the diameter was too big to pass through cleanly. Looking at the top view of the original model, I did realize the devs had actually just squashed them or scaled them horizontally to make them fit without intervening in the other solids of the model. But for me, I didn't really like that. It didn't make much sense for functioning hydraulics, which is what I was trying to kind of reimagine them here as. So I redesigned them as a kind of tapered rod system with different stages, narrowing down slightly in diameter size as it went forward through the weapon, so it wouldn't clash too much with those side pieces. It was a little janky at first, but I ended up really liking how it looked. Practical and satisfying. And while some of it did still cut into pieces like that kind of front barrel holding part, I just kind of cut slightly into them and then beveled those edges, and it looked pretty good. Finally, I added grip detailing to that main handle by slicing it into segments and beveling the cuts to make it look padded. A few extra bolts here and stuff like that, bevel passes and cleanup sweeps later. And finally, I decided the Heavy Lancer was good to go. So I imported it into Blender and gave it the full material treatment and ran those renders. This thing came out mean. Just the right mix of classic design and modern polish. I'm really pumped with how it turned out, so without further ado, let's take a look. I think what I really enjoy from not just this model specifically, but all 3 of them, is that it allowed me to practice choosing a set material palette, since each weapon modeled here kind of follows the same color palette in the original artwork, which does make sense since the weapons are all manufactured by the company Megacorp in the game. This shows as that kind of blue and dark metal pieces, dark rubber grips, all that fun stuff. But moving back specifically to how the Heavy Lancer turned out, I loved seeing that massive glowing lava magma drum canister thing reflect onto the shiny metal pieces that are all around it. It looks so close to the original model while really selling its most standout visual aspects, and I couldn't have been happier. But nothing, and I mean nothing, will prepare you for our last model of the video. It's the weapon that defines the entire series, a name that certainly has gone down in video game guns history. Many of you who are fans of the Ratchet & Clank games, I'm sure you already know what's coming. But really, it's so cool. So, without further ado, it's time, you guessed it, to rip ya a new one. I couldn't make a Ratchet & Clank video without making a RYNO. And lucky for you all, I gave this PS2 era weapon of mass destruction one hell of a modern makeover. If you're new to the series, the RYNO, or known in its full, longer name, the Rip Ya a New One, is the ultimate late game weapon in every single Ratchet & Clank entry. It's the BFG, essentially, of the franchise. Always hard to get, always absurdly powerful. Earlier games, like Going Commando, locked it behind a massive price tag typically, while later entries made you hunt down blueprints or scattered parts to earn it. Every RYNO looks a little different, but they all follow the same core concept. An unhinged, full auto rocket launcher that absolutely floods the screen with explosions. So, naturally, I went with the RYNO 2, the version featured in Going Commando. I kicked things off in Plasticity by importing my reference views like usual, which I got from the original model. But here's where things got a little bit different than the previous two models. I didn't actually align all the reference images onto the correct axes and planes for the full process. The design's cylindrical shape had me kind of jumping between views constantly, and before I knew it, I was already deep into the modeling process without needing a fixed setup, so I kind of just rolled with it. My starting point was that front barrel assembly, that huge sort of housing cylinder part that has all the little rocket tubes attached to it. I extruded out the central housing as that thick cylinder and then used a radial array to evenly space 8 individual barrels around it. Each little barrel has its own cone-tipped shape, which gives it a really satisfying silhouette once everything was in place. From there, I added 2 support rings that would hold the barrels together, still, again, shown in the original model and texture, and then I bored each barrel through with a cylinder boolean cut to make sure they weren't just solid geometry. Since the design suggests this whole assembly kind of spins like a minigun for rapid rocket firing, I added a central rotor piece to visually anchor that idea. It's not functional, of course, but it does sell the concept, so yeah, I think it came out okay. Next up, I moved to the rear of the weapon, that jet engine sort of looking piece at the back. I used a series of circle profiles lofted together to create the cone-like shape, and then worked my way forward, extruding out each major cylindrical chunk until the core body was kind of all roughed in. With the major forms in place, I started layering in mid-sized details, so for example, I modeled the half-circle sort of extrusions on each side of the front barrel housing, and then cut into that said housing with those inset lines and silver paneling based on the original model. I won't lie, these bevels kind of fought with me every step of the way, cutting into this front part, but I kept pushing and eventually got them to play nice without breaking the mesh. Now, the optic on the side, that was a real blast to model. So on the PS2 model, it's just a flat kind of polygonal ring, barely a scope at all, obviously due to the low polygon count restrictions of the PS2 hardware. I wanted to stay faithful to that low poly style, but still modernizing it. So I used a multi-edged polygon for the base and beveled the edges and built an outer and inner ring part to it. I added a bunch of bolts and screws all along these edges and even modeled a reticle as solid pieces so I could later give them a holographic look in Blender. Seriously, it turned out so good, and I was really happy with this. Then came that bottom handle, and I gotta say, Insomniac, what were you thinking? The curve is completely backwards. Like, if you tried to hold this in real life, your wrist would probably have a bad day, especially considering this thing is a rapid-fire rocket launcher, and that just looks uncomfortable to grip. But hey, I stayed true to the original, even if it makes no ergonomic sense. Moving up from there, I tackled the side-mounted sort of computer unit, I suppose. It's mostly a chunky box with a screen unit on top attached, and while getting it cleanly embedded into the cylindrical core was tricky, I managed it with some solid boolean work and bevel passes. Lots of angle cuts here to match the reference, but super satisfying once it all clicked. After that, I built the angled bracket and secondary grip that kind of connects back to that rear handle. Simple extrusions and bevels, but they really help sell the weapon structure. I added in some hinges and big old screws, just like on the original, to make it feel mechanically structured and sound and all that. Then I dropped in a simple trigger and moved back to the computer unit to model those tubes or pipes, I guess, that run from that computer unit to the barrel housing. These were done with sweeps in Plasticity using a rounded curve, path, and a circle profile. Quick, clean, and surprisingly satisfying to execute, honestly. The tubes connect back into intake-looking cylinders that are slightly larger in diameter on that rear housing and computer unit. And speaking of the rear, that final jet engine back piece-looking part kind of gave me some trouble. The original solid I kind of blocked out for it was slightly off axis, which made lining things up a pain. So I had to kind of go back and remodel a lot, but once I got my bearings, I used some sweeps to create the 4 kind of internal pipe bundles that you see in those cutouts, and then duplicated and rotated them into each quadrant. I also added some geometry in the bottom of each cutout so I could assign different materials later for some added depth and detail. After a final polish pass, mostly detailing along the side, undercarriage of the weapon and handle and so, I was done. So I pulled the whole thing into Blender, gave it some of those Megacorp style materials, and hit that render button. This is the RYNO 2, a legendary weapon of video games history, and it's fully reimagined in the modern day. Let's take a look. Honestly, this model alone, the RYNO 2, makes this entire video worth all the effort it took. So many hours of modeling and rendering and all of that. But it really does hit different seeing a weapon you've looked at for years, since you were just a wee young lad, actually look like how it did in your kid-like imagination based on the original low-poly designs. The memorable glowing blue barrels and back exhaust shining and reflecting off the orange tinted brass metal, it's so freaking cool. And this is why videos like this and modeling projects like these are so fun and satisfying to me. I get to take classic video game weapons that had such a huge role in my early childhood gamer journey and give them the love that they deserve, preserve their original artist's intent and design, and elevate the concept that was already there. Now, I know, a lot of you from my last video were huge Terraria fans. Thank you, by the way, so much for the crazy amount of support on that last video, my first long-form video. It means so much. But I understand that a lot of you may not have even known about the Ratchet and Clank series, let alone the decades-old PS2 title. But this video is kind of what my content and channel are all about, bringing video game weapons and weapons from other media and even in the future, real-world weapons to life in 3D modeling. Taking original concepts like, say, pixel art sprites from Terraria or low-polygon models from Ratchet and Clank and pushing them to their fullest visual potential. It's just so cool, so satisfying to see their final render results. Like, when I do models like these, those final renders are not me bragging or showing off really at all. I view them as the weapon itself doing its strut down a runway, like it just got the most gorgeous makeover ever. And I really hope you all feel the same. So thank you so much for taking the time to hear me gush about a game that I hold so near and dear to my heart, and to gaze upon not just the time and effort I put into these models, but also the original artist's endeavors and effort as well. Very, very, very cool. So with that, I think this is the... Wait, what was that? Oh no. Okay, yes, I know. Yes, I know you guys want more Terraria guns. I know, I'm literally working on it right now, okay? Please, it's coming next week, please! I know!